Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And I'm here today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
It's going great. I'm coming to you from the Moore's kitchen. I just had a thought. There's all these shows that are successful about baking and
Yeah.
baking stuff. Why don't we do a show where I'll be baking something and then we'll talk about EVs at the same time?
How about we make creative recipes with ramen noodles?
Hey, as a matter of fact, that's what I had for lunch yesterday. No,
See,
dinner
there,
last
there you
night.
go. Yeah, I may want to introduce a new line of high protein noodles on the show.
Hey, I'd be for that. I
Yeah.
love noodles.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, yeah, but that'll get a little deeper in the weeds. Anyways, so today we got some interesting stories about GM, Tesla, um, Bitcoin, and some other things. Medical research. So we're kind of all over the board. Although I'm not sure how medical research crept into the list today, but we'll discuss it anyways.
Other than the fact that anymore it's so hard to tell what is real news and what is fake news, right?
Well, even
So,
with us, right?
even with us, it's like earlier this week, the world the world of tech and everything was suddenly thrown into upheaval because this, I'm going to call a black swan for better term, this black swan called DeepSeek shows up and it's a fraction of the cost of running other AI programs and things. And now, of course, what's happened is now we're starting to people say, well, is it real or is it a Chinese psyop? Right? And
Yeah,
when you
so according to OpenAI, they're using Chinese children to just look up stuff on Google and type you out a answer.
that wouldn't surprise me. So who knows? So I threw that article in there because it's obvious that even you and I, we see news headlines and things and we take them for face value. But is that really the story, right?
Yeah, and I'd
Uh,
like to appeal to them instead of using Chinese children, if they could use those children in the Congo that are mining cobalt, that they could give them a second job Googling things for people. No,
right,
I don't know. It's interesting to see some of the discussion about DeepSeek that so it uses less energy. They're using older chips, so they're
right.
not having to buy the latest and greatest from NVIDIA. And but there's some talk that what they're providing for answers isn't really the same level. That it's like
Right.
a really scaled down version of different things, and I don't really know what that really means. Okay,
Well, how
so
how how good can it be if you take it from GitHub and you put it on your phone, right?
yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know. And
Oh,
I don't claim to be, the smartest person in the world. I know about what I know about. So, and that's not
yeah, and
something I completely get. I'm using a bunch of AI programs that I use for free. I've occasionally paid for some different AI tools and I'll use them for a couple months and I'll drop them. And, because I don't really use them enough to really justify
right.
paying for them. I've had people ask if I was AI on here, and it's like, I'll be honest,
Well,
we've
I have actually met him, folks. So he is
yeah,
real. He's a big, tall guy, by the way.
yeah, yeah. It's really funny. I sit low and with where my camera sits, but
Right.
we've done on YouTube. Besides the show, we publish hundreds of other videos every year, and I will tell you that we have done some that were the entire video was AI. There's some that you think it's me and it's AI, but I haven't done one in a long time. I don't know if I've done one in the last 6 months. It's been a
Okay.
long time since we've actually let AI do one. Now, I've never been AI, we've never done like an AI avatar talking of me. It's always
Right.
just been my voice, and I never appeared in the video.
Right.
So, but there's been some things we've done with AI, and we've tried even to write scripts with AI, but they all sound goofy to me. The
Yeah, well,
scripts don't
I've,
they don't sound human to me. They sound like it was written with AI.
yeah, and that's I'll watch some of these videos. I try to keep track of what's going on in the world, and a lot of what's going. I'm particularly interested in what's happening in the Ukraine, and you get these reports about the war. The thing. It's obvious that the thing has been written by an AI, and the video that's intercut oftentimes has absolutely nothing to do with the thread. So it's obvious it's been compiled by AI. We don't do that here that I'm aware of, folks. Other than Dave experimenting along with our colleague Yogi in India, we experiment, to see what happens, but it's not a part of our regular routine. I am
No,
not a bot. I'd love to be at a beach in Cozumel or someplace right now, sipping margaritas, but no, I'm here in Nebraska, cloudy day, sitting in my kitchen because it's warmer in here than it is down in the office. So,
yeah. Well, anyways, let's start out. I want to talk about General Motors. So Mary Barra,
yes,
we haven't talked about General Motors for a bit, but General Motors, a lot of people don't realize how much. So well, they used to have the Bolt and the Volt, and didn't they have something called the Spark? Was the Spark them as well?
yes, I've driven the Spark actually at the plant in Maryland where they made the motors, and
Okay.
they provided the press with one of them to drive around. It was fun. It was a nice little car to city car, obviously, to drive around. So yeah, so Spark.
And the EV1 before that. They probably had something else. None of those
I've
cars are
driven
around anymore, right?
No, no, I've driven the EV1. I really wish that car were still around because that was pardon my, I can say that. We're not on the FCC. That was a damn nice car. It's a
Yeah,
shame what they did to it.
we had somebody on here once that had an EV1. I think Mike and I interviewed somebody who
Hmm,
was doing education work to train people to work in the EV space as
right,
technicians and things like that. And he had
right,
had an EV1, and now he has like an EQS 580 or something like that. So he's driving the Mercedes EV, but he'd had one, back in the 90s, he had an EV1.
right.
Anyways,
Yep,
but the reason I mention that is because now from GM, you can have a Hummer SUV, you can have a Hummer truck. You've got $110,000. They were $300,000 when they first came out because people jacked the price up. But
right.
you can have the Chevy Equinox, you can have the Cadillac Lyric, you can have GM or Chevy full-size pickup trucks. There's a whole lot of Chevy, and GM products out now that are EVs. And Mary Barra came out to say that in quarter 4, if you only account for parts and labor, they made money on their
Yep,
EVs.
yep.
Now, as far as retooling the factories, if you take in
No,
the cost of retooling the factories and all that, they did not.
right.
Okay. But as far as going forward, they're making money on every new EV that rolls off the line now. So they're joining the likes of Volvo, Tesla, Hyundai, and a few other companies that have figured out, a bunch of Chinese companies too, that have
Yeah,
figured out. Of course, Volvo's questionably Chinese because they're part of Geely. But
yeah.
there's a small club. It's probably less than 10 companies that have figured out how to profitably make EVs, and that's been a big struggle because Ford still isn't there, Rivian isn't there, Lucid isn't there. A lot of your European automakers probably aren't there. I don't know about Merc. I would think Mercedes and BMW would probably be selling them profitably, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
Volkswagen,
I haven't
don't
I
know.
haven't seen anything that anyone that has spoken to that issue as yet, other than Volkswagen coming out and saying we're losing lots of money, we're going to have to close factories and lay people off because of this whole thing. So it's hard to know what's happening. I think, and part of that also has to do with the European government trying to figure out where they're going to come in on the tariff issue, right?
Right. That's a
That's
problem.
yeah,
The Germans are being decimated in the car industry. I think I heard they're losing 10,000 jobs a week or something crazy like
oh,
that in the
yeah.
German automotive industry.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and it's because of the rise of the Chinese. And I've seen other people who say the only country making cars in 10 years might be China. Although I don't know about that. You know, we do
Well,
have some
yeah,
really positive things going
I
on over here now.
we have a lot of positive things going on here, and if you look behind the curtain in China, they are having significant economic issues there. That the reason why Europe is put those tariffs in place as they did, up to what 30% or something like that.
Mhm.
It is simply because of the fact that the Chinese governments, not just in Beijing, but all the various local party officials and cities and things, have subsidized those industries to such an extent that they can bring, and of course, lower labor costs, that they can bring the price of those cars down to get them out the door and on the ships headed to Europe or Africa or South America and Europe. Less so here in the United States because obviously we have both the Biden and now the new administration making it very difficult for them to get cars into this country. Other than Zeker, I saw the couple headlines I posted. Zeker had their cars coming to the United States. Well, they parked them inside the convention center in Las Vegas for the Consumer Electronics Show, but they're not here in the
So
U.S. yet.
so there's some different numbers here that are kind of interesting for General Motors for the quarter. So for the fourth quarter, the company reported a loss of 2.9 billion, but for the whole year, the net income fell to 6 billion net income. But here's where it starts getting weird with different accounting takes. They had a record pre-tax profit of 14.9 billion, which was a record for General Motors. And so Mary Barra's job's pretty safe if she's turning in numbers like that. But the fact that they made EVs, here was the term, variable
I
profit
know.
positive, but it
That's why I put that article and sent it over to you because I thought, well, maybe Dave will understand. There's an
no, I
explanation in
get
the
that.
article, but wow, variable profitability. What is that?
Yeah, so they're profitably making the cars because they spent the money to retool the factory in the
Right,
past.
right.
Okay. So that's very much a net positive. Hold on, give me a second here.
So the bottom line is it's good news. They appear to be on a path that takes them to making enough money to pay for that retooling and the R&D that went into the cars and that type of thing. Right now, they're paying for the labor and the parts. So the for the car and the labor it takes to assemble and put them together and get them out the door. They're making money, which is a positive sign.
While the stories we have don't give us any sales numbers on units sold, the Equinox and Blazer, which were both new for 24 or 25, they apparently have been really popular. So
Well,
that's
I've yeah,
really good thing.
I've seen. I think I actually was following behind a Blazer a week or so ago here locally. So, um, not sure, but what I look for anymore is if it looks like it's kind of an EV. I try to get close enough to either see the badge, which is really hard to do because that's not safe, or I look, is there an exhaust pipe, right?
Right, right.
If there's no exhaust pipe, then maybe it is an EV. So,
Um, yeah, yeah. For those of you who don't know, Bill and I live out in the remote part of the United States called Nebraska, and we don't see all the
fly,
EVs like people on the coast.
flyover country, we consider it.
Yeah, man, I was pretty shocked there was that plane accident. We didn't talk about that. There was a
Oh,
American
that is
Airlines plane,
so.
a commuter, yeah, tragic, from
I
Wichita.
Yeah, well, it's a United Airline. Well, it was American, I think, right?
It was American.
American. Well, we would probably consider a medium haul aircraft. It had 60 passengers and 4 crew members, which is the 2 pilots and 2 flight attendants on board. Um, Lining up for its approach to Reagan, which is the airport just across the river from DC, and ran into a. My wife told me I hadn't seen that, so she's reporting this to me that it was a an Army Black Hawk on a training
Yes.
mission. So these there was obviously a flight control issue here. The pilots on the American Airlines aircraft would have been in touch with approach control, um, and well, they weren't on the ground yet, so they wouldn't have been in touch with ground control. But with approach control, who were the Army pilots talking to? Apparently, these guys, it was a training mission. I am hoping, because it was at night, it was dark. I'm hoping that these guys were not trying to fly on a training mission in a very busy airspace. I mean,
Yeah.
very busy airspace on infrared goggles. You know, were they out there training with their infrared goggles on? God, I hope not. I actually I don't know if you recall, but there was a airline Airflota flight that took off from that same airport and crashed into the Potomac River. And I wrote a story that appeared. I did a lot of research on this back during my journalist days. And that airplane, I actually, the story was called "The Secrets of the Black Box." It appeared in Discover magazine. But it goes into and recounts the research and how they discovered what happened with that particular airplane. So I'm really sort of conversant with the operation. I've of course been in and out of Reagan multiple times, and it's
Mhm.
basically it's just across. The Pentagon is not that far away, so I'm a little confused as to why it happened. Somebody was not talking to somebody, and this just took the lives of what 67 people, the
Yeah.
three Army
64 and
personnel,
3.
yeah, and then the 64 on the aircraft, which
Yeah,
is just
really tragic. Because we really, man, we hadn't had a commercial flight that lost lives, I think, since the 90s, or as far as something major. I know there was that case of that, was it Korean Air or Malaysian Air or something that had that incident in San Francisco, but I think the only fatality was from somebody getting hit by a fire truck.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but even that landing on the Hudson River, nobody died, and that was over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's been a long time. It's really sad. We haven't.
Well, there will be, of course, there will be the black boxes will be recovered. I'm assuming there's some similar type of device on the Black Hawk, and there will be NTSB is right there,
Yeah,
you know,
convenient.
in town. I've been to that facility. I've talked to those guys that do the investigations. So at least they won't have to commute to this one. But God, the families of those people. I guess it was an ice skating competition team. Ice skaters were coming back from Wichita.
Yes.
So I just your heart breaks for those people. I've written. I've been involved. I was indirectly involved in a similar type crash. When I was working for an airline. I was the passengers that I was doing passenger check-ins. The passengers that I was checking in were passengers who would be sadly doomed because they would be involved in a crash in Denver, and that flight originated here in Omaha, and I was the guy among my colleagues who were checking those passengers in. It was snowing. They were asking, well, it looks a little dicey weather-wise. We'll be okay. And I'm reassuring them, yeah, it's no problem. You'll be fine. We've had flights operating in and out of Denver, with no problem all day. And of course, it's that flight that developed. I think it was an icing problem, and crashed and took everybody on board with it. So I've had personal experience with airline crashes and
Oh,
the
Lord.
tragedy that happens. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. All right, well, we're going to move on to Tesla news.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So Tesla reported earnings and revenue for the fourth quarter missed analysts' estimates, and the stock initially fell for a little bit, and then it came back. But its expected earnings, or its actual earnings per share, were 73 cents versus expected 76 cents. So it's a 3-cent difference. Its
Yeah.
revenue was 25.7 billion versus 27.2 billion expected. So it was short about $1.5 billion for the quarter. Their operating income declined 23% year over year to 1.6 billion. That's pretty decent drop, but we're going to come back to that number in a minute. Okay.
Okay.
So they said that the average selling prices across all its models were a major reason for the decline. Well, except for the Cybertruck. Net income dropped from a year earlier by 71%. So it was a pretty big difference in that happening. Now, I know that the big hit was in the automotive, because there's a lot of other sectors. They have their battery storage business. They have,
Right.
I think they have solar. Don't don't they make solar panels? I don't know. They sell solar in the United States. I think they do overseas.
What's that now?
Do they? I think they. I know in their energy department, I think they manufacture some of their own solar panels overseas, right?
I don't actually know if they're even in the solar business. They were manufacturing at a plant up in New York State,
Hmm.
and I think that plant is no longer
Okay.
building solar panels. I don't know, where if they're still in the panel part of the business. They're obviously in the battery storage part of the business, but I don't know. Well, they were doing what? They were trying to get these solar tiles. Wasn't that the thing that instead of having panels, you just replaced them with these solar tiles? So to be honest, I have not kept up that closely with what they're doing in that particular side of the business.
Well, here's something. So it gives some numbers, and this is by quarter, but it's the light blue is automotive revenues. The darker blue here, or whatever that color is, that's services. And the yellow is energy generation and storage. So you can kind of see that from, you know, uh, they've consistently had, they've always had automotive, but they have these other sectors bringing in stuff, because they certainly do battery storage and Hawaii and some other places, and
Right.
Australia, different places. But it's interesting to see what is going on there. Now, their stock is up 2.36% today.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's interesting how, actually it just spiked. Actually, it's up almost 4.5% today. It's up $17. So it's a pretty decent thing. A part of that is a rule change just came in, and they're allowed to report unrealized gains on Bitcoin
Yeah.
as net income.
$600
Okay.
million dollars worth, wasn't it?
600 million bucks. So
Yeah.
it caused a 34% increase in their operating profits or net income for the quarter. So it raised it considerably from where it was at, from that 1.7 back to like 2.3 billion. Okay, so that was kind of interesting, because they're treating it as a currency, and it's showing that currency on hand went up in
Yeah.
value, which that's an interesting precedent. So here's the thing. So one of the things that's been purported, and this is something you obviously really can't do with the stock market and real estate, some things like that, is this idea of taxing billionaires on unrealized gains. So this all of a sudden sets a weird precedent. So I don't know what you're going to say about this, because if now we're not treating Bitcoin as like a stock, okay, so for the most part, most of us have thought of Bitcoin more like as being a share of a stock, right? Okay, so now under this new concept, if companies are able to show they had an unrealized gain, that means they have to pay tax on that unrealized gain. Okay, so that creates a whole new set of worms. So for like Tesla, reporting an extra
Good way to
600
put it.
million means they have to pay an extra $120 million in corporate taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that's not individually, but that is definitely,
Well, this is
a new
yeah,
thing.
this was a debate going on within the crypto community before the current administration took over. Is you know the previous administration and SEC and so on treating it as a stock, and so do we pay tax on and I own a few shares of a couple of these, and so I know from on a day to day, on a minute by minute basis, what my stock is doing, but I haven't sold it. So do I, at what point do I have to pay tax on? Do I have to pay tax because at this particular moment in time it is X,
Mhm.
but in April 15th it's X either plus Y or it's X minus Y, right? It's so what
Well,
do I do? What do I do? And they're still trying to figure that out, I think.
see, I think when you start talking about the value of stocks and real estate, I don't think you can tax unrealized gains. I think it's
No.
unrealistic to ever expect anybody to ever be able to grow a business. Because the big thing is, let's say you start a business and it grows and grows. Well, in theory, and I'll give you an example. If you were in the medical space and you had let's say you had a dental clinic, okay? Well, and you make a profit in that dental clinic of like $200,000 a year as a dentist, okay? Um, that dental clinic to a private equity group might be worth 15 times your annual revenues. So in theory, the market value of that dental clinic is 200,000 times 15. That's $3 million, right?
Right. Yep.
So now you owe tax on unrealized gains of, let's say, 20%. That's $600,000. Well, you're only earning $200,000 a year.
Right.
How are you
Right.
supposed to pay taxes on that?
Right.
Okay, so that causes a bit of a problem. But with crypto, it's a little different because it's a currency, right? So they're trying to avoid SEC scrutiny by being treated as a currency
Right.
and not a
Come on.
true investment or commodity or
Right.
whatever.
They want to
Okay,
get on this. They want to get on the Chicago Board of Exchange rather than the New York stock market.
so the challenge here is to take a company like MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is really deep in Bitcoin. This has got to be causing a problem for them, because if they're now, I don't know if they have the option of doing it or if they have to do it, but if MicroStrategy is reporting that, then it makes them look amazing, but they're going to have to pay a tax on unrealized gain.
Yeah.
And that seems, to me, for Tesla, it may not be a big deal. Okay. But for MicroStrategy, might be a whole different,
Yeah.
situation. And
That's
I really don't
Michael.
like,
Yeah. Michael Saylor. Right.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, I don't know. I don't like the idea of introducing this as in that way, but I can understand, for instance, if you were holding a lot of dollars like in euros and the value changed significantly, I see that is a unrealized gain, but the Bitcoin one is going along the same lines. So it'd be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah.
It's
Well, that.
certainly,
Yeah. This goes back to the Ripple XRP. fights with Gary Gensler and that whole sort of.
Hmm.
Here's the new wrinkle. Have you heard this one? The
Mm-mm.
Fed chairman the Fed chairman says it's okay now for banks to hold crypto in
Hmm.
their holdings, right? As long as as long as the banks have taken precautions to back, to hold the typical sort of reserves that are needed for that kind of a thing. So that's kind of changed the playing field a little bit now too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Bitcoin's up to 105,000 now.
Yes, yeah, it's
Yeah,
up.
and
My other holdings have started to inch their way back up as well, which is kind of a good thing to see. So,
what's interesting is that news really about the being able to bank it didn't
yep.
really affect the value of the coin much today. So it's only up 1.4%. So it wasn't a huge change by, I mean, it is a
Well,
change, but
there's
it's not
yeah, there's
earth
still
shaking.
there's still lots of uncertainty about it. And, is it really money, right? And of course, I always come back and explain: is your money really money?
Yes, yes.
Because what I look at my bank account and I see a bunch of numbers, but all those are ones and ones and zeros on a bank's computer somewhere, right? It's
Hmm.
not really. It's in its essence, it's just the same thing as cryptocurrency, but by a different name.
Yeah, there is something questionable that happened. The government's talking about maybe using blockchain technology to create both more transparency and safer issues for data.
Hmm.
And there's something that may be questionable comes out of this.
Such
Um,
as, such as.
so there's a company that was listed as a possible blockchain supplier, and it went up 40% yesterday or the day before. And Trump media
Who
had
was that?
just bought big into it. I think it's called Moonshine
Oh
or
God.
something like that. And
Oh, the
anyways, yeah, so Trump media bought
link,
into
link.
it, and it went.
Yeah, maybe link chain. There's a new one. I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, I probably had the name wrong. I just saw an article about that, and
I
it's like,
think
oops.
it's one of those ones that's being so hyped. The whole blockchain area is just a big hype machine, really. Um,
It
there
is.
is
It is.
good. There is technology there that's valuable and can be useful for a whole bunch of different things. Many
I
of
see
which
people
are
creating. I was going to say,
yeah
I see people creating new coins all the time, and it's like,
yeah. It's
look, if
just
your coin doesn't add real value to the
no
universe.
no. It's the value of the coin. I'll give you an example. Okay, the value of holding a coin like, let's say, the ADA in the Cardano blockchain
Hmm.
is that's how the people that operate the ledgers, right? The
Hmm.
distributed ledgers, that's how they're paid for their services.
Right.
Okay. So that's the only purpose for that. Now, the value of that will fluctuate depending on how much volume is passing through the chain and all those kind of things. But that's the token, the currency with which you are paid if you are a stake pool operator for a SPO, and or you operate one of the nodes, the computer nodes, distributed nodes, on the thing. So there is value there, but these other tokens that are out there that are meme tokens, they're just a way to hide for people to, if you will, Ponzi, right? Get everybody
Hmm.
all excited about this particular coin, have everybody, novices, like me, throw money at it and then do what's called a rug pull, sell off now. Then instead of it being 5 cents, a token, it's now $5. Man, pull my money out when it's $5, right? And look at the profit I've made. So that's what so many of these coins are about, is just simply somebody's way to scam a bunch of, unfortunately, foolish people.
Yeah, sadly, that's how I feel about most of them. And I can understand when you've got something that has real utility, but man,
Yeah,
I've seen some real stretches on what that utility is. I read people's white papers on what
yeah,
their coin is about, and it's like, come on, give me a break.
yeah,
This isn't
yeah.
really,
Well, of course,
adding much value.
speaking of which, I'm working on a couple of those ideas, as you
Yeah,
probably are aware.
right.
So,
Yeah. Um,
but I
all right.
won't.
So
But I won't try to hype them here. So don't worry about it.
there you go. There you go. Okay, so for 2024, Row Motion, a EV research house, showed that there was over 17 million EVs sold in 2024. Of course, it's another
Yeah,
record.
yeah.
Um, let's see. December 24 alone had 1.9 million EVs sold, a growth of 5% on the previous month's record. And all major regions grew monthly and yearly in December 2024. Overall, global EV sales grew by 25% in 2024 compared to 2023. I think the year before it was up only like 20%. So, I may be wrong on that, but I think that was where it was. Now, the European market ended the year down 3% compared to 2023, as they entered a testing year in 25 due to emission standards coming into effect. I don't understand why they would have gone down, but some of the countries already have such high adoption, they really can't go any higher, right? Because once you get past about 90 something percent, it's hard
Well,
to really grow
and
much
there's
more.
a fair amount of uncertainty, because the European Union is not a monolith, right? You have all the countries that are a part of that, but they're separately governed countries with separate internal politics and policies. And there's somewhat, you've got, right wing parties gaining influence and things, and just that uncertainty, I think, is causing, of course, prices are high over there for things. So I think people are probably, if you're going to buy new car, you probably have a lot of confidence in the future of the economy. The less confidence you have, the less likely you probably are to go and buy yourself a new toy.
US and Canada market grew 9% in 2024. In China, this is staggering. China EV sales grew 40% in
Yeah,
24 versus 23. Another monthly record for EV sales in December, they had 1.3 million units sold. So out of the 1.9 million units sold worldwide, 1.3 million were sold just in China
yeah,
in last month. Let's see. So so global was 17.1 million, which was up 25%. China 11 million plus 40%. The European Union, the UK, and EFTA, I don't know what EFTA is, EFTA, sold 3 million, which was down 3%. The USA and Canada were 1.8 million EVs. Now that's normally we've seen the US numbers, so this is adding Canada to it. I don't know what part of that is Canada, but it's up 9%. And the rest of the world was 1.3 million, which was up 27%.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that includes, the rest of the world includes like India, Indonesia, Brazil, a
Right,
lot of big countries that
right.
were part of this. Um, let's see if it gives us any other news. It's always interesting to see where plug-in hybrids and just regular hybrids fall into that number.
Yeah. I shared that article with you partly because it was it led me from an earlier article. The earlier articles basically said that 2025 is going to be the redemption year for electric vehicles. They've kind of slowed, plateaued, but 2025 is going to be the year according to row motion. Uh, okay, let me go see the row motion article. And so that's what I sent you was the actual row motion article. You see anything
Got it.
in there that says it's going to be a great redemptive year in 2025 for electric vehicles?
I don't understand why the word redemptive.
I
That sort of, I don't know. What
yeah,
was the word that I said that means if you hear somebody use this one word? Oh, delved. We're going to delve into what's going on.
I delve
Yeah,
into yeah.
that means you
That
scripted to
that
Chat GPT.
that sounds like a word that would come out of the White House press office. So
Yeah, I loved it. I've seen people where they write their prompts that says, "Write me a script to do such and such, but do not use the word delve."
right,
Yeah, and
right.
I thought that was pretty funny because
Well, yeah, and we were talking. Speaking of which, we were. It's a good segue over to this article I shared with you regarding mainly medical research papers.
Mhm.
It is unbelievable the number of papers that are generated on a monthly basis. Like it's huge. It's millions of research papers, but they're now finding that a not insignificant number of those papers. One guy puts it at 2%, but who knows? Are
119,000 weekly
weekly,
are
yeah,
published.
and and
Six
and,
million papers a year.
and so they're finding that like I said, not an insignificant number of those appear to be fraudulent, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
the sheer volume
so
of
they
the numbers
estimate
of
2% are probably fake. And
yeah,
but 2%, I mean, that's still you're talking like 2,400 articles a
yeah,
week.
yeah, exactly. And you notice they've got a list of the words. If you go down a little further, you'll see a list of the words that would indicate, because there's two researchers here in the US that have started looking at this question, and they've found sort of cataloged the words that they look for now that would make it suspicious that this is, either AI generated phony research or it's just those elementary Chinese school kids that you talked about earlier, right?
Hmm.
Typing out these things. Um, I mean, this is a problem, and we got all this, fake media that's being thrown into the system to confuse us and worry us and whatever, right? And now you got to question the very science papers that these journals are publishing.
Oh, they won't tell us what those phrases are
Well,
if they
there was
figured out. Like,
yeah, well, there
so
is. I think
I've
there,
looked.
yeah, there
Yeah,
is a
I looked
list.
through the article. If I'm just kind of curious what some of those. Oh, here we go. Tortured phrases.
Right,
So
tortured phrases. Yeah, that's it.
neural, instead of saying neural network, if they say brain organization is the tortured version. So apparently 25,000 papers were released with brain organization instead of neural network.
Yeah,
Wow. Um, Instead of production technologies, they say creation innovations. That at least
yeah,
rhymes.
yeah.
Identification, recognizable proof. Okay, I see this. Raw data, crude information. Oh, this is really good. Instead of the word insect, they use creepy crawlies. Well, that might
Creepy
seem kind of a little
crawlers.
strange. Yeah. Yeah. They don't
Yeah,
say crawlers, they say creepy crawlies.
right,
Yeah. Yeah. So some of that's almost better than me delving into something.
right.
Um, I've noticed using Notebook LM. So ChatGPT likes the word delve. Notebook LM likes the term deep dive.
Deep dive.
We're going to
Yeah,
take a deep dive into this
yeah,
topic,
yeah,
and let's
yeah.
do a deep dive. I hear
Right.
that all the time now. I
Yeah.
notice people saying it on, their, podcasts or that they're explaining something, and I'm like, I'm starting to question if whether or not they are an either reading it themselves or they're using an AI voice of themselves,
Right. Yeah.
doing it to generate that deep delve. Sorry, deep delve.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm getting my AIs confused. So, anyways, yeah, but that is a staggering amount of papers to
I
think
know.
that there could be that many.
I
Um,
just I was just dumbfounded, because I occasionally I get alerts on science papers that are of a particular interest to me in the way of mycology. And
mhm.
so I'll get an alert on those. So I got kind of a feel for what's going on, but I had no idea. 119,000 a week. Wow.
That's a lot of papers being published. Yeah, you got to be pretty smart to keep up with all the latest news in the science space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
Or
imagine?
or, or yeah. Okay.
I I've often wondered, people get PhDs and you're supposed to write a thesis on something nobody's ever written about before. And I'm like, well,
Oh
if
yeah.
you're
How
in the
do you?
science space, how do you come up with something original? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I know
Well,
in the
I'll get my. Generally you have a thesis advisor. I know this process because my daughter went through it. So you have a thesis advisor who is a respected academician in the particular area you're studying, and they say, "Well, oh, this is something I wish I had time to look at, but I don't. So why don't you, as my grad student, can think about writing a thesis on it?" Okay. And so 5, 6 years later, whatever it is, you got your research done, you've written your thesis, you defend your thesis, you hopefully successfully pass the defense before some peers of that price of that advisor, and you were handed a PhD certificate. Um, so it's a laborious, difficult process. But yeah, how do you come up with, my daughter's case? It had to do with the it's like this long, the title of this thesis, right? That has to do with
Mhm.
how a particular type of immune cell, right, reacts under specific certain conditions, of the body. And, you know, she'll probably tell dad you're totally full of, pardon me, full of shit on that. That isn't what I wrote about, but that's what I understood she wrote about. So yeah, it's not it's not, it's find coming up with a topic would not be easy. So
No,
maybe
I
that,
know in the business space, people get a PhD in marketing, and invariably they just go out and they do like surveys. They do
yeah,
market surveys on different topics and write about that market survey. And I'm like, I don't
right,
know if that's really adding to the greater knowledge
right.
or anything, to make that worthwhile. But anyways, we have a final section we want to talk about, and this was Clean Technica has this article about it being like death watch time for
No,
hydrogen and EV tolls. Now,
yep.
I find that kind of fascinating because we see Joby in the aviation space. Even had
Hmm.
somebody mentioned that Joby did a hydrogen EVTOL that went like 500 miles, and they did that. They tested it this past summer, and we never covered that particular
I don't know if
aviation
it was.
feat.
I don't know if it was Joby or Archer that did that.
It was Joby. I looked it up.
Okay.
There was some information on that, but um, you know, I don't think EVTOLs are going away. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. The hydrogen, you know, when we had Jigger on Shaw on here on Tuesday, he was
Right.
talking about them using salt mines to store clean hydrogen. They're making clean hydrogen from electricity in Western states where they have to give away the electricity at night because there's too much electricity.
Right.
And so what they're doing is they're making clean hydrogen and storing it in these salt mines. And that is a greater store of the electrical capacity than using battery tech. And that was kind of a fascinating perspective because essentially, they're making it for very low cost, right? But most of the time when we look at hydrogen, it's so expensive to manufacture that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm really curious how that whole hydrogen and salt mine thing works. I mean, how do you seal that against the world's smallest atom, right? And at what pressure do you store it in that? There's just I got to, okay, maybe they can do it. I'd like to know more about how they do it and how they overcome the issues with it, and what do they do with it? Do they run it through a fuel cell? Do they pipe it to a local refinery to refine gasoline? What are they using it to what make maybe agricultural fertilizers? I mean, I'd like to know more. We should probably try to find somebody that does and interview them here just for our benefit.
Um, so one of the things I guess as I look deeper into the article, they're really just saying that hydrogen being used for EVTOLs isn't going to go very far. And I guess
Yeah,
part of their theory is that you have something that could be so volatile being so close to the passengers.
yeah. I thought that was a little. The phrase I think he used, it would instantly, because you have to store it at such a high pressure, low temperature, that
Mhm.
basically it's if it ever escaped from there, it would freeze, instantly freeze the passengers and the crew, before the airplane went down. Or I don't know about that. I'm a little skeptical of that, but it's a difficult. There's a reason why hydrogen is generally not found by itself. It's always bound to something like water, right? Or hydrocarbons. That's where the hydro part is the hydrogen part of the carbon atom. So I, I I'm not quite sure. I mean, I know he quotes Joe Rome in that, and I know Joe, and I've interviewed him, in the past. And he's no fan of hydrogen, that's for sure. It's an interesting energy storage medium, which is really what it is. Um,
Right.
but whether it'll work in aircraft, there's work being done on it. There's companies, that are. I think there's recently a company used it to run an aircraft engine. And I'm not sure if they were running it through a turbine. It was a little unclear in the article whether they're running it at like a gas through a gas turbine, like we do with jet fuel, or whether they were running it through a fuel cell to generate electricity to propel the aircraft. That I wasn't quite clear on. But there's both of those are being investigated.
I didn't realize this. So, um, in California, during a 6-month period when the hydrogen refueling stations that used to be open should have been at their most reliable, they were out of service 2,000 more hours than they were pumping hydrogen.
Yeah,
Um, and Quebec did a similar test, and they did a 4-year trial, and for at least a full third of the hours, they were out of service there.
yeah.
That's one a third, the other one more than half.
It
Um,
has been a profoundly disappointing technology. I remember when it first got introduced and all the hopes that were, the money that was spent on it, particularly in California, and by various automakers from BMW to Ford to GM, seeing it as a replacement for batteries, just has not lived up to that. Just hasn't.
no, it's really sad that it just isn't getting there like it should. And you'd think it's one of those things we're kind of hopeful on, and we hear all the time people telling us, "Oh, hydrogen is going to do this and hydrogen is going to do that." Because we see these articles really hyping hydrogen, and it's like, it's the thing is,
Kind
it's
of, kind of
been
like, kind of like meme coins, right?
yeah. Well, it's really though, in comparison to EVs, it's probably been more practical for at least 5 to 10 more years.
Yeah,
And they've had plenty of time to work on it. They've definitely experimented on buses and different
yeah,
things, and it's just not really quite working out.
yeah.
Anyways,
I got to ride in Iceland
uh-huh.
on their first hydrogen fueled transit bus in
Hmm.
Iceland. So it does work, right? It's just cost issues and production issues and storage issues. Just make it a difficult avenue for a future, sustainable transportation system. That's a difficult path to try to follow.
It sure is. So, Bill, that's all I got for today.
Hey,
Folks want
thanks
to,
everybody.
yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we'll